Hey friends, Dr. Mel here. In this video, I want to talk to you about something that can be a very sensitive topic when it comes to our relationship with food and healing emotions related to food. But first, I want to start off by sharing a personal story and where this comes from and where my relationship with food was, where it's been, where I am now, and where I see myself moving towards. It's evident that our culture really struggles with our relationship with food. There's diet cultures, there's restrictive diets, there's hundreds of different diets underneath the sun. And it can get confusing, it can get challenging, and honestly, it can get emotionally draining. And it can get just shameful, and we feel guilt, and there's so many emotions that go with diet culture. Now, before I share my story, I really do want to preface that the word diet really does include and involve everything that you eat on a daily basis. You know, a lot of industries and a lot of companies have picked it up as a very common term and kind of a buzzword to say, oh, I'm on the keto diet, I'm on the paleo diet, I'm on whatever diet it is. And really, your diet is simply just anything you choose to eat during a day, when we get back to the foundational elements and back to the roots. So I just want to preface that when I'm using that language in this video, I don't mean it to say that it needs to be restrictive or you can't have certain things. I literally mean it from the original definition of what your diet includes. So back in the day, when I was about 10 years old, my parents got divorced. And that has its own myriad of things. And for those of you who have tuned in with my channel, you might know my personal story. And if you haven't, you can scroll through the videos through our playlist and check out one of our podcasts where I share my personal story, and Michael, my brother, has shared his personal story over time too. And one of the ways that I dealt with my parents' divorce when it comes to emotions is through food. And my relationship with food was not very healthy from a young age. At my mother's house, you know, my dad was a chef, he is a chef, and he was the person who was mainly cooking the meals. And I remember when he was home having very well-rounded meals that included meat and vegetables and seafood, and we had lobster, and it was just part of our everyday diet. So when my parents got divorced, I love my mom dearly, but she's not really the best chef in the world. I think she's gotten better because she's done her own healing. But a lot of our meals literally were just like hamburger helper, McDonald's, ravioli, macaroni and cheese, tacos. So a lot of things, it was just kind of like a meat and a pasta. And because she was a single mom, right? She wanted to get food on the table, and she would leave it up to us for the rest of it. And we really didn't have any like rules or regulations or really any sort of like conversations around food and food that can be nutritious and supportive and used as fuel and not just something to binge on. So I remember being at my mom's house when my parents went through custody and who had the kids when. I remember being at my mom's house and having like no rules, and I could eat whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. And because one of the ways that I dealt with my emotions, didn't really know how to process it that well, is I consumed a lot of food. Oftentimes I overate. So I guess you could say that was a form of an eating disorder. I'm not big into labeling things, but I know that was my pattern growing up at my mom's house. My brother and I would do the same thing. I mean, we would get McDonald's and we would eat everything. And then we'd eat some more, because one of the ways that when we don't know how to necessarily consume and digest our emotions in life is we will find things to digest, we will find things to consume, whether it's food, social media. There's many forms of ingestion and digestion. So for me, it was just consuming a lot of food, and that made me feel full, because in other ways in my life I didn't feel fulfilled. Now to my dad's house. So I would be at my mom's majority of the time, and when I would go to my dad's, it was every other weekend and every Thursday. And my dad would make really well-rounded meals with who was my stepmom at the time. And I remember going over there as a young teenager, and we would have dinner, and for me, I still felt hungry, but I was restricted. My dad and my stepmom would say, hey, like, you've had dinner and, you know, no more food for the rest of the night. No more food. You're done. And I remember just being like, what are you talking about? Like, why can't I have more food? I'm hungry. And mind you, I was definitely a heavier child growing up, and I got made fun of a lot. But one of the ways that I found satisfaction was through food. And I will preface this, like, I get that the whole food relationship it's just very dynamic, and healing from food and our relationship with food is definitely, I recommend having a professional, someone who understands this work at a deeper level, work with you. I did not have that. So I was going from this experience from my mom's house, being able to eat and consume whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, and I had no rules, to days of the week where I felt so restricted, I felt so shameful, and that literally I would sneak up in the middle of the night, because Michael and I slept, you know, on the couch at my dad's house. I would sneak up in the middle of the night in the basement, and I would just eat whatever I could, because I didn't know when I'd get my next meal, because they were very controlling, to say the least. And again, this is no judgment to my dad and my stepmom at the time. This is just my experience. And I would get mad at them, right? I'm like, I can eat whatever I want at my mom's. And to this day, you know, I've had conversations with my stepmom saying, we were just trying to protect you, and, you know, we were just trying to, like, help you have well-rounded meals and, like, all this. And they were doing the best they can with what they thought was good for my health, and what they thought in their own mind, in their relationship with food, was going to be helpful for their kids, right? Now, I don't necessarily agree or disagree with their actions, but my point in sharing this is that I was living in two different worlds. I was living in a world where I could do whatever I wanted, and then on the weekends when I'd see my dad, I was so restricted. So then what do you think happened? When I went back to my mom's house, I would overconsume to compensate, because I didn't feel fulfilled. I was eating a lot of food and I was probably full, but emotionally I was empty. Emotionally I was empty, and emotionally I was confused. And so my turning point and my addiction became food. And I was so consumed with, when I was going to get the next meal? Was I going to get enough food? And now I see this, like, how this shows up in other patterns of my life and unfelt and undealt with emotions. And when we look at this, when we look at these two different paradigms, is one right or wrong? I don't know. I'm not here to say, like, this way was wrong and this way was right. But what I am here to say is how many of us have potentially dealt with situations like this, where we're in one environment and we feel flexibility and we feel freedom to explore, and then in another environment we feel so closed off and so constricted, and that we can't explore food and that sensation of fullness. We don't feel like we have this healthy relationship with food. And that will show up in many different ways of life, in many different areas of our life. And I want to come on here and just say that we all have a journey and we all have a relationship with food. And food, it's interesting, we can have such an interesting relationship with food because it's something that we need to nourish our bodies, and yet at the same time it can be so manipulated. And it's been manipulated in our culture, how you can't have this because it does this, and you should have this, and da 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 da. And I am guilty of that. I am guilty of preaching that word. I am guilty of being the person where, like, I can't have any of that because it's bad. And what I've come to realize, being a practitioner who works with many women and men who deal with, I don't want to say unhealthy, who struggle with their relationship with food, what I've come to realize is the power of language and the power of actually tuning in with your body's true needs. What I came to discover about myself and some of the people that I work with is many times we aren't actually hungry for food, but rather we're dehydrated. We need more water, or we're unfulfilled in our work, we're unfulfilled in our relationship, or we haven't been given space to feel and express and digest our emotions. And so that comes out sideways, thinking like we need more food than we really do, or we constrict food when we actually really need it. And we become so out of tune with our own body signals that we start to rely on other forms of structure. We start to rely on other messages, different companies saying you need to follow this or else, or you should follow this or else. And we become so reliant on external wisdom when in fact, part of this healing journey, especially with food, comes back to tuning into your own innate senses. Getting into the grocery store and stopping for a minute and just saying, okay, body, like, what are you feeling right now? Like, what do you need right now? And the more that we can do that, and the more that we can get in tune and in alignment with our bodies, a lot of our cravings and our addictive patterns start to actually become more nourishing strategies, and we can pause and we can ask ourselves, what is it that we truly need? And that maybe we're hungry for human connection, and maybe we're hungry for changing our career, maybe we're hungry for love, right? A lot of our addictive behaviors and foods that have a deeper impact on our neurology, it's something deeper that we're craving and getting underneath the surface. So I invite you, in my share, in my story, I really invite you to start to pay attention. Pay attention to the language you're using. Pay attention to how you talk about food. Pay attention to how you're digesting life and how you're processing your emotions. Pay attention to your emotions. Pay attention to your body cues. And one of the first steps in doing that is pausing. Just taking a moment and just pausing and closing your eyes. And maybe we're just hungry for a little bit of oxygen and breath. Oftentimes when we start to calm down our body and calm down our nervous system, we actually crave more complex, high vibrational foods that serve our cells. And again, I'm super guilty sometimes of getting in the paradigm of right, wrong, good, bad, because I'm human just like you, where we label food as bad and we label food as good. And that can be super detrimental to people who are going through eating challenges and have suffered from eating disorders and body dysmorphia. I've dealt with that too, right? Where I have felt that my body is never going to be good enough. And in reality, like, I've had to heal from that too. And that's just not the case. I am always good enough. I'm always worthy. And I want to feel fulfilled and nourished in my body. So language really matters. Pausing and then shifting our language. Right now, I am in the middle of doing Whole30. Some people would agree with that. Some people wouldn't. Some people think it's very restrictive. For me, having some version of a structure sometimes is really healing to me, because I came from an experience of structure, no structure, structure, no structure. And that was a lot for me to handle. So right now, what feels really nourishing for me is to have some level of a structure where I am choosing to be in it, and not because I have to, because someone's making me, but I'm choosing to be part of this experience that feels good right now. Did it feel good 3 months ago? No, but it feels good right now. And oftentimes I'll get those cues from my body because I've done this work, and I encourage you to keep doing this work with me. Is, oh, now feels right to do Whole30, or now feels right to tune into maybe a more vegan diet, or you know what, I am gonna have that maybe beer, right? I like beer. So starting to listen to your body and changing your language. I think oftentimes in the diet culture, it can be so like, you have to do this and you can't do this. It has to come back to you choosing it, because when you use the word choice and you're choosing to say no to things and yes to certain things, you have the power. And you're gonna have days that maybe you need something else. Now, as a practitioner, a different background that I have is understanding how certain foods versus, organic versus something that's processed or something that's refined or whatever. I have a background of understanding biochemically how that impacts our physiology and how that impacts our immune system, our nervous system, our digestion. So that's where sometimes I dive into that food is maybe low vibrational, and that's okay. But knowing that when we consume things, it has an impact and it has a consequence. And I don't mean that like a negative consequence. There's just cause and effect in life. So starting to change your language on choice, cause and effect, how we are choosing our relationship with food, and getting out of that I have to or else, or good, bad, right, wrong. Food is food. And yes, there's different energetic and nutritional qualities of different foods. And I invite you to explore that. I invite you to explore that for yourself when the timing feels right. This healing journey and this relationship with food is such a process, my friends. And I want it to be easy for you. And I want you to know that you're not alone, and that it comes back to pausing and shifting our language. It comes back to pausing and feeling into our body. What does our body need? What are we craving at a deeper level? And perhaps it's not something to ingest and digest, but it's an emotion to process and eliminate and let go. So more to come on this, and how our traumatic experiences impact our relationship with food, how stress impacts our relationship with food, the gut-brain connection. It's all connected. And I promise you, I have more strategies and content coming your way, always coming from a place of coming back to you, tuning into your energy, trusting your body, that yes, you can watch these videos and yes, you can follow all these structures, but at the end of the day, what matters most and what's going to be most sustainable is you tuning in with your own innate strategies. I hope this video brought you value. I hope it brought you perspective, and I hope it brought you a sense of grace in your healing journey with food, because it's not easy. This work is for the warrior, as I say. It's a process, it's a journey, and I'm with you every step of the way. Let me know where you're at. Let me know how I can support you in the comments below, how you're doing with your relationship, not just with food, but your emotions, your health, and everything in between. I love you so much. Thank you so much for tuning in. Peace, love, and keep inspiring.